We're now over a month into the NBA's free agency period being opened up, and for the most part, all of the best players available have been scooped up, either re-signing with their current teams or going to new teams for a fresh start, but that's not the case for all of them. At this point in time, there are still quite a few players capable of contributing positive minutes to a team's rotation that are still available, and that brings us to today's video. I actually made a video just like this one a few weeks ago, but there are even more players I wanted to touch on this topic, so I basically am making a part 2 right now, and if there's a player that I don't discuss today that you think should have been discussed, it's probably because I went over them in that last video, so be sure to check that one out as well after you watch this. But basically, we'll be going through 5 more players that I cannot believe still remain unsigned on the open market, because all of them have a useful skill set in today's NBA. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first player we'll be discussing that is somehow still an available free agent right now is Seth Curry. Would you believe me if I told you that the NBA's league leader in three-point shooting immediately became an afterthought when they hit the open market? No, you wouldn't believe that, right? Well, that's exactly what's happening right now. It feels as though Seth Curry has become severely underrated, because I doubt half of you even knew that he was the one who led the NBA in three-point percentage last year, as he hit 45.6% of his shots from deep while playing 68 games, so the sample size is pretty big. Seth has unfortunately had to live in the shadow of his brother throughout his entire career, which sucks because obviously nobody will ever be able to compare to the greatness of Steph Curry, but Seth has carved out a pretty strong NBA career of his own, and is absolutely one of the best shooters the league has to offer in his own right. In today's NBA, where there are teams attempting more threes than ever before, front offices are hiring entire analytics departments to ensure that they're putting together a roster that can play as efficiently as possible, and true sharpshooters seeming to be a bit harder to find. I can't wrap my head around all 30 NBA teams seeing an absolutely elite shooter from all 3 levels sitting around garnering very little attention when he could absolutely be signed to either a minimum contract or close to it. Of course, I'm not unaware of Seth's shortcomings as a defender, and he's not really someone who will serve much handling the ball, but his off-ball movement, decisive shot-making skills, and top-tier efficiency should be viewed as a weapon that teams can utilize as an option off the bench, so whoever ends up bringing him in is going to get a ridiculously good value in that context. The next player that is somehow still an available free agent that should be signed already is Alec Burks. Burks has put together a nice 14-year career in the league to this point, and at every stop, he's proven to be a reliable scoring punch off the bench that always seems to surprisingly put the ball in the basket more efficiently than people give him credit for. He uses his 6'6" frame well to create separation and get shots off over contests, he has a nice mid-range game, and he's consistently been a strong three-point shooter. This past season in Miami was a weird one with all of the Jimmy Butler fiasco happening, and then the team struggling to find an identity afterward, and Burks' role definitely fluctuated a good bit throughout it all, but the one constant he provided was lethal three-point shooting. Burks is a career 39% shooter from 3 who just shot 43% from deep last season. He's shot 40% or more in 3 of the last 4 years before that, and he on average takes between 4 or 5 attempts from 3 per game, so the volume is there to justify it. This isn't a fluke. Burks is an established scoring threat from all 3 levels. He's not going to be gunning for any starting jobs at his age, and he's admittedly losing a step off the dribble, so you have to be realistic with what you expect out of him, but for a player who would only need to play about 15 minutes per game, he can make an impact in spurts and spell a team starter without fearing a drop-off in scoring output. The next player that is somehow still an available free agent after over a month is Bol Bol. Bol Bol has been a tantalizing basketball prospect since his high school days, and as a player who stands at 7'3" with guard-like skills and a useful perimeter jumper, there has always been hope that he could turn those physical tools and unique talents to produce like a two-way difference maker, but that just has not happened thus far in his career. In Denver, they never had the patience to try to tap into his potential for extended periods of time because they were in win-now mode. He did show some promising flashes in his one season in Orlando, posting career highs in every statistic and starting to play with a more visible confidence, so when he signed with Phoenix, who were reloading hoping to build a contender, it was his chance to play with some high-end talent and potentially provide impact next to them, but unfortunately, his inconsistencies resulted in even more fluctuation in his role, and now 6 years into his career, we still haven't really seen him take off. I get it, he's not always the most hardworking player, defensively you would hope for more disruption with his length and size, and offensively the idea of him has typically always exceeded the reality of him, but there just has to be a role in the NBA for a 7'3", floor-spacing big man who moves as well as he does. Get him in a rebuilding environment with less pressure to immediately impact winning basketball games, and there could be gold to strike in this young man, because while he's definitely not a consistent positive when he's on the court yet, you just can't teach what he has and should be viewed as a tantalizing, low-risk, potentially high-reward signing that can be had on a minimum contract. The next player we'll be discussing that is also somehow still an available free agent is Precious Achua. Achua is a former first-round pick from the 2020 NBA draft who has spent the last 5 years playing for Miami, Toronto, and New York. The appeal of him as a prospect was that he was a hard-working, athletic big man who played with a high motor, crashed the glass hard, and defended at an above-average level inside. There were some flashes a few years ago of him being able to even become a decent stretch big man that can help space the floor on offense, and if that type of improvement came into fruition, the appeal with him as a player would have skyrocketed, but unfortunately the shooting stroke looked like fool's gold, and his jumper has been a bit of a disappointment for 3 years in a row now. He's shot below 30% from 3 in 3 straight seasons after hitting 35% of his threes that 4th year ago, and that lack of development is definitely one of the leading causes of there being a lack of interest around the league in signing him. There have even been some reports indicating that he may have to sign and play in a league overseas, and that just feels like way too big of an overreaction to his lack of development in one area. Achua is still a ferocious rebounder in the minutes that he gets, and he plays with a terrific bit of effort on the defensive end for a backup big man. He may only be 6'8", but he plays bigger than that, and he provides a level of versatility, allowing him to help out at both the power forward and center position. Although his three-point shot hasn't been consistent, I also wouldn't say that it's completely broken either, and he does still shoot them with confidence when he's open. So again, for a guy who can be attained on a minimum contract to give energy off the bench, there's no reason he should be unsigned at still 25 years old. And finally, the last player we'll be discussing that is somehow still an available free agent right now is Trey Lyles. Lyles' game has never been flashy, but he's been a consistent and reliable member of rotations for 10 years now, and while he's not exactly coming off of his strongest year ever, I once again do believe him remaining unsigned is an overreaction to what could easily be argued as a blip on the radar and an off year, instead of assuming that it's the new norm for him. Throughout his career, Lyles has been a steady presence in the pace and space systems that he's been a part of, as a typically above-average three-point shooter who moves well in transition and stays active off the ball as well. Last season was a very weird one for the Sacramento Kings in general who he was playing for, with a roster that never quite gelled. Lyles was forced to play backup center at times, which is just not a role that he's set up for success in, and he even dealt with some unfortunate groin injuries that can linger longer than many seem to realize. Lyles is just a smart player who knows his role and does whatever is asked of him to the best of his abilities, and the truth is, teams that want to win need guys like him as their 8th man, for example, because not every player is going to be dominating the ball, making the glamorous plays. Lyles does the dirty work, he defends multiple positions, and I'd be willing to bet on his three-point shot bouncing back to the 38% clip that he knocked down 2 years ago, so any playoff contender that has an opening in their front court should be viewing him as a strong buy low option. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below which teams you think would be good fits for these players. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.